Robert Ash,
Here.
Jim Doris, Roderick Edmond, Bill Floyd,
Here.
Roderick Firesen,
Here.
Ryan Glover, Terry Griffin,
Here.
Frida Hardage,
Here.
Alicia Ivy,
Present.
Russ McMurray, Al Pond,
Present.
Rita Scott, Rita Scott,
Present.
Christopher Tomlinson, Thomas Worthy. Mr. Chair, we have 8 board members participating.
All right, thank you, Marie. And on behalf of Chairman Edmonds, who could not be here this morning, I'm happy to call this meeting to order. First item is the approval of the minutes of the September 30th, 2020 Planning and Capital Programs Committee meetings. Do I have a motion for approval of those minutes?
This is Hardage. I move approval.
Al Pond, second.
I've heard the motion and a second. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? If not, is there any objection to approval of the minutes? Then the minutes stand approved. Second item is a resolution authorizing an increase in the contractual authorization for vibration and acoustical consulting services. It's a presentation by Larry Prescott, the Assistant General Manager for Infrastructure. Larry?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, board members, Mr. Parker. And I direct your attention to the item requesting resolution authorizing an increase in the contractual authorization for noise, vibration, and acoustical consultant services, AE 22527. Recommendation is for the approval of a resolution authorizing the general manager, CEO, or his delegate to amend the contract to add additional funds for this contract with Wilson Ehrig and Associates, Harris, Miller, and Hanson. Next slide, please. This 100% local CIP funded contract is a legacy A&E on-call contract, which started in 2012 with a 5-year base and 5 one-year options. We are currently in option year 4, so year 8 of the overall possible contract terms. The original $800,000 authorization has been expended, and we continue to need these services. The estimated cost of the consultant's additional services is as $160,000 for the last 2 remaining years. So next slide, please. Therefore, the request today is for the approval of $320,000 for the remainder of the contract options, with continuing services for preparation of the impacts assessments for code compliance, to address citizen complaints, design support for system upgrades within our facilities, and issues related to track vibration isolation, specifically the TR4 project and the new rail vehicles, as well as other construction noise and vibration. So with approval today, we will endeavor to recompete this program before the final year options are up to foster better competitive prices going forward. Next slide. Thank you for your attention. I open the floor up for any questions.
Are there any questions of Mr. Prescott about this issue?
This is Ash. I move approval.
Your motion for approval of the resolution.
Harding.
Do I hear a second?
Hardage seconds.
Second by Harding. Any discussion?
This is Ash. I will say that with a 10-year-old, 7-year-old, and 3-year-old at home, I could use some acoustical and vibration consulting around here too.
Well, and I will, before we vote, I'll only make one comment. I had and Frank Rucker, if Frank's on the call, I'm not sure, but the other day I had a call from a friend in Decatur about some work going on around the Avondale MARTA station and the noise during the night. They were working on the track there. First of all, I want to thank MARTA for helping lower that noise situation, but I want to make aware of working at night situations, especially in residential areas. I'm not sure that this applies to that because I don't know of any way to do that kind of work without making a lot of noise. So, but anyway, just make mention that, first of all, Frank and his crowd really helped smooth over that situation. So I appreciate that. So having said that, if there are no other questions or comments, are there any in opposition to this resolution? Are there any abstentions? If not, the resolution stands adopted, Mr. Prescott.
Okay. Thank you.
Mayor Floyd, just I'm here and just making you aware that, of course, our lessons learned from that particular incident, we are now, through Melissa's group, External Affairs, doing a more enhanced notification to the neighbors, et cetera, so they can be aware and have a feel for what we're doing. Now, this particular contract didn't pertain to that actual construction noise. This is more of an operational system where you actually hear the train running on the rails, and how do you basically, get better performance on that. But we'll continue to monitor anytime we're doing active work around the residential area and make sure we get the notifications out to the neighbors. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Frank. And just to comment that the most important thing in those type situations is letting them know how long it's going to last. I mean, people will put up with anything for a short period of time if they know it's going to end soon. So that's just one of the issues there. But thanks for your help with that. So
thank you. Okay.
All right, resolution. The next item is the resolution authorizing the solicitation of proposals for the procurement of job order contracting 3.0 program RFP 47533. Marcia Bomar, Assistant General Manager for Capital Programs Delivery Presentation. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Floyd. Good morning, everybody. So for this presentation and the one that follows, I want to point out in general, we've been really looking long and hard at how our various programs and contracting services are operating, and where we find opportunities for improvement, we are bringing them to the board so that we can move forward in a better way. So if you can go to the next slide, please. We currently have a program, a JOC program, which is a job order contracting, where we hire a contractor and then we have individual projects that we put under that umbrella the intent is to expedite and move through those in a very efficient manner. The current contract, what we're calling JOC 2.0, was functioning but not particularly well for a wide variety of reasons. And so in June, we decided that we would go into our ramp down period and not extend the contract to its full extent. We felt we could do it better. So if you'll go to the next slide, please. So some of the lessons learned from the way the current contract is functioning was that the projects that were selected to be done under this contract were not necessarily a good match for the type of contract that we set out. Many of the projects were just too complex and had very significant wayside requirements. We also had not adapted our safety and quality and testing requirements for smaller projects. So it was very difficult to get good contractors to pursue the work, the subcontractors to pursue the work, because the requirements were so onerous that they just felt that they couldn't do the work, meet all the requirements, and cover all their costs. The other big lesson learned is that the current contract structure includes what I'll refer to as overhead. It's general conditions where on a monthly basis we pay the contractor to be kind of ready and waiting whether we have any work for them or not. So that, in our opinion, is pretty inefficient for the use of our funds. So for those and the other reasons that are cited, if you'll go to the next slide, please. We have met and we have come up with a greatly improved structure to improve upon all of these lessons learned. So one of the issues we have is that we have so much work going on, and our internal design staff has a lot of pretty large projects for which they are responsible. It makes it very difficult for them to fit in these smaller projects. I already mentioned our issue with the safety, quality, and testing. The construction periods for the projects that we have taken under the JOC 2.0 program have been, in some cases, very long in duration, which doesn't really fit the framework of a good JOC program. So we've addressed all of these different aspects in coming up with a recommendation for JOC 3.0. You'll go to the next slide, please. We are looking to receive approval to go out with an RFP for this program. The annual budget would be $5 million a year. 3/4 of that would be for the contractor and construction, and then 25% of it would be for the soft cost, the internal MARTA personnel management. And I'll show you on the next slide how that would be allocated. The projects would range nominally in the $200,000 to $1 million range. We've had a very good conversation with Sean Thomas from Facilities, who will be coming to you with his indefinite quantities contract. And the kinds of projects on which he works are a little bit smaller. So we discussed, and right around the $200,000 mark is a good break point between the smaller projects that he does and then the projects that would fit in JOC. So the two programs are going to really complement each other very well and allow us to get a lot more done with the dollars that we have. We're looking for projects that have a shorter construction duration and, as I mentioned earlier, have less complexity in their requirements. Next slide, please. So typical kinds of projects. The photographs at the bottom show you before and after a roofing situation where we had a roof that was failing, and then the JOC program came in and did a roof replacement so that it has many benefits, obviously, for not just the roof, but the interior of our facilities to have this condition. And with the JOC program, that can be done pretty efficiently. You can see some of the other types of systems that we would be working on under this contract. We currently have some projects in the pipeline that would be a good fit, that would meet all the criteria that we discussed earlier in picking less complex projects. Next slide, please. One of the other important things is we wanted to really streamline the staffing for the JOC operations. We have had 5 dedicated capital project coordinators along with a senior capital project coordinator running the existing program. And with a reformatting where we will have a conceptual design done in-house, and then the contractor will give us a proposal for doing the design, so it's like a mini design build. We will review and approve the design that is put forward, and then the contractor will proceed with construction. And under that format, we need a significantly smaller staff to manage all of the projects. So we will be saving some dollars on the administration that we'll be able to put more into the construction. Next slide, please. So at this time, we are requesting permission to go out with an RFP, a request for proposals, and we've chosen this format for the procurement because we feel that it's very important to make sure we have highly qualified contractors. If we go out with just a bid, then we are driven strictly by the low bid, and we feel that qualifications are very important to take into account as well. This will be a work order contract under a master agreement, so we will be able to control the flow of work and the types of projects. We'll use our standard methodology where we'll do some internal cost estimating so that we have a good foundation to compare to the contractor's proposals. And one of the improvements will be that the contractor will be paid on a delivery basis. So in other words, they will have milestones built into their work order, and they will be paid as work is completed, as opposed to the earlier methodology where they were receiving funds to cover some of their costs, whether they did any work or not. Next slide, please. And so just to conclude, we would request that you would approve the procurement of the new JOC 3.0 as an RFP. We feel that it will take us about 2 to 3 months to get this out on the street and advertise and go through the process for selection. We are working with the Office of Diversity and Inclusion to set a robust DBE goal. We feel like the types of projects that are included in a program like this can draw from the very deep bench that we have in the metro area for DBE firm talent. We will encourage joint ventures or partnerships of some variety so that the perhaps less experienced firms will have the opportunity to come and partner with MARTA and learn as they are mentored by the more seasoned organizations. We are planning to do an industry day event to make sure that the community knows about this opportunity. And we will partner with organizations like the Atlanta Business League, as we have done in the past, to help us promote this opportunity to the broad DBE community. We expect to select up to 2 proponents and we'll be requesting a budget of $25 million for a 5-year JOC program. And with that, I will be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Marcia. Are there any questions for her on this program?
This is Robbie Ash. I move approval.
Hear motion for approval. To hear a
I'll
second.
second Griffin.
Jerry Griffin seconds. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, I do have a quick question for Marcia.
Mr. Pond.
Great change with putting a ring around the cost and the time, and this is perfect for smaller contracts. Do you have a limit on the size of the construction, estimated size to fall into this program? I mean, is there a hard number, $1 million, or is that just an approximate?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We will stay with the $1 million ceiling that was part of the original contract. We feel that that's a good limit on size and scope of these projects.
And you'll have at least 2 contractors involved, so you will not be limited to one source, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments, questions?
Hi, this is Rita Scott. I have a question.
Please, Ms.
Yes,
Scott.
ma'am.
Yes, can you elaborate, not extensively, but just a little bit on the mentoring opportunities?
Certainly. So we have a lot of really good smaller firms in Metro Atlanta who would be great to work on this contracting opportunity, but who may not yet be ready to lead an opportunity like this. So by having an industry day event and some other partnering events prior to the submission of proposals, we hope that we can create an environment where some of the more experienced firms will partner with some of the less experienced firms and give them the opportunity to come and do work for MARTA and learn from both their partner and from MARTA how to be successful in working with us.
Just wanted to verify.
Go ahead, please.
She's already spoken. I understand.
Okay.
Thank
Any
you.
additional comments or questions? I have 2 quick questions, Marcia. One is, when you get these proposals in, what flexibility do you have for consideration for minority MBEs or WBEs or disadvantaged businesses in awarding this contract with regard to cost or other issues that may affect it?
Yeah, so I appreciate the question. So we will have a scoring rubric that will take into account many different factors. And so when the source evaluation committee convenes, they can put together a construct for the evaluation that will allow us to ensure that we provide some opportunities for DBE firms.
All right, this seems like to me a perfect program to use small businesses to do this work. And I think there are hundreds of those, especially minority businesses in the Atlanta area, that will fit into this program. So I think I like the hint that we might be willing to consider in some manner how to get these contracts to those type of businesses for this particular. It just seems like a great avenue for MARTA to do that. My last question is there any, as you go through this project, are there any reporting requirements to the board, periodic reporting requirements about what you've awarded, what you haven't awarded, and that kind of thing?
Well, there are no official requirements, but I will be very happy to update you, you know, on a quarterly basis or an annual basis, whatever your preference is, on the production of the program as well as the minority participation.
Mayor Floyd, if I may,
Frank,
this would be an ideal item to include in our capital programs quarterly review, as Marcia said. So we can just carve out a slice of that agenda to actually report there.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, any additional comments or questions about this?
This is Robbie.
Sorry.
No, this is Robbie. I have one more question, which is, and this is a little bit outside the scope of this project, but it would certainly fall under it. Who at MARTA is responsible for ensuring wage and hour law compliance on part of our contractors, so that people aren't being misclassified and they're being paid, you know, as what federal law requires? Is that an Office of Diversity and Inclusion program? What? Who audits that?
I know that the Office of Contracts, Procurement, and Materials does do reviews of rates. So I think they may be one of the places where that's happening. I think also internal audit does some review. I'm not sure if the Office of D&I does a review as well, but I know those other two offices do some of those reviews.
So good morning. This is Liz. Just to supplement what Marcia said, but both procurement and then D&I is actually involved with that as well, to make sure that all of the DBEs are also, the contractors are complying with those requirements for DBEs.
And is that a proactive audit process, or are we just taking in paperwork and monitoring the paperwork flow? I mean, do we send people out to make sure that someone who is an electrical 2 is actually an electrical 2, or what concern is that particularly as we start awarding more and more money in construction, that I want to make sure that the employers who are doing it right and following the law are not penalized accidentally by MARTA in a lack of enforcement in terms of some of the wage and hour stuff.
This is Paula Nash with the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. We actually do send someone out on site visits, and we do actually look at that kind of thing and ask questions during our site visits to make sure that those laws are being followed.
Thank you very much. I have nothing further, Mayor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ash. Any other questions or comments concerning this resolution? We have a motion and a second. So is there any objections to the passage of this resolution? Are there any abstentions from the vote to present this to the board? Hearing none, the resolution is adopted.
Thank you very much.
Item 4 is, Marcia, you're up again. Resolution authorizing the solicitation of proposals for the procurement of specialized professional services, RFP P47520. Marcia, you have the floor.
Thank you thank you, Mayor Floyd. Yes, if we can go to the next slide, please. So the request that you have in front of you is to allow us to go out with an RFP to procure what are typically very technical services for some of our more complex projects and programs. You can see the different departments that have historically taken advantage of these kinds of experts throughout their programs. In the past, we have used what's called, you've referred to as GCPS, and the contractors who were procured were brought in through the GSA schedule. We think that that is not the appropriate way for us to move forward, and so this request for proposal permission is to allow us to go out and procure these services through a competitive process. Next slide, please. So this is different from GCPS, as I said, because it will be competitive. It will have a meaningful DBE goal. So I know in the past, the report outs on the performance of the GCPS have included information about DBE participation, which has been robust. But in fact, there was never a goal set for that. So we feel that it's really important to have a very clear goal for each of the different areas, the different departments, because their needs are a little bit different and the market may be a little bit different for each. So we'll be working with the Office of D&I to establish those goals and make sure that the proponents selected are highly qualified to serve those departmental needs. And I want to reinforce that we will not be using the GSA schedule, but we will be using the process that we always use when we go through a procurement, where the proponents will submit their rates and then we will negotiate as necessary based on our standard practice. Next slide, please. In addition to going out for a competitive process to procure these services, I also want to point out that based on the policy of the board to bring more work in-house and to assure that we are building our knowledge base internally and not fully reliant on or heavily reliant on consultants, you will notice that the amount of these outside services is dramatically reduced. So the column in the blue is what has been expended over the last 5 years under GCPS. It's about $83 million. And for the 5 years beginning with fiscal 22, in total, we are looking for a budget of just under $43 million, so a pretty significant drop. And this is all part of the plan to both streamline our staff as well as bring in the appropriate talent as FTEs as we can, and then just use consultants in appropriate, very specialized niche areas. Next slide, please. And with that, I'll open up for any questions you might have.
All right, any questions? Thank you, Marcia.
I'd move approval, Mr. Chairman.
Hear a motion for approval from Mr. Griffin.
Second, Halpern.
2 seconds.
I hear 2 seconds, so the motion is introduced and seconded. Any discussion or comments? Questions?
Mr. Chair, I've got a question.
Mr. Pond, please.
Basically, we're providing additional people, bodies on an outsourcing basis, these specialized services. What would these people be doing in the police area? I think I understand the other areas you would staff this contract with. I'm curious about the police support.
Chief Crayer, are you on the line?
Good morning.
Sure. Yeah, there we go.
It's my understanding, Marcia, that these are the video pooler contracts.
Chief Courier Frank Rucker here, and you're right. That you tend to use GCPS for those kind of positions as well as any technology needs you need.
What we've done is we've looked closely at those contract employees, and we're moving towards FTE positions for those contract employees. We've already downsized by one position, saving almost $220,000 on one position. So I think moving into fiscal year 22, we'll be able to budget a few more of those FTE positions and move those contractors into full-time positions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? All right, hearing none, we will vote on the resolution. Are there any objections to the passage of this resolution? Are there any abstentions from the vote on the passage of this resolution? Hearing none, the resolution is adopted. Thank you very much, Marcia.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other matters to come before this committee this morning?
Good morning, Mayor Floyd again. This is Rita Scott. I just have a quick question for Mr. Rucker.
Okay, please.
Yes. Originally, we proposed the starting of the Indian Creek train station revitalization for late September. And I know things are not on track due to COVID, but can you give me an update as to where we might be?
I believe that shifted more to the beginning of the year. Mrs. Scott, I'll be doing an overall presentation at board meeting to update all the various station rehab and a number of projects. I'll make sure that I include that update for you on the 19th of November. Let me go and confirm where we are. I know where we are in my mind. I just want to confirm that. All right.
Frank, if I may, on Indian Creek, we are working toward 30% design. So the A&E firm has presented the concept to the team, and we are reviewing them because, as always, we have to balance, our wants and wishes with the budget. And so we're going through the concept to ensure that we're maximizing the effectiveness of the dollars that we're spending, but we're very close to 30% design on Indian Creek.
Yeah. So Marcia, what she also wants is a projection on when we're actually going to start seeing some boots on the ground from a construction standpoint. Yeah, and I want to make sure we basically tell her where we are in terms of that. Right.
So that you will provide an update the November board meeting?
Yes, ma'am. We have a quarterly presentation coming, and we'll make sure that's an agenda item.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, if not, this committee meeting stands adjourned. Thank you.
All right, operations and safety, everybody ready to go?
Yes, we are.
Yes, we are.
Will you call the roll, please?
Sure. Roberta Abdul Salam. Robert Ash.
Ash, I'm here.
Jim Durrett. Roderick Edmond. Bill Floyd.
I'm here still.
Roderick Firestone.
Present.
Roderick Firestone.
Present.
Ryan Glover. Thank you. Ryan Glover. Jerry Griffin.
Here.
Frida Hardage.
Here.
Alicia Ivy.
Present.
Russell McMurray. Alpon.
Present.
Rita Scott.
Present.
Christopher Tomlinson. Thomas Worthy. Mr. Chair, we have 9 board members present.
Thank you very much. First order of business is approval of the minutes of the September 30th meeting. Could I get a motion?
I move to approve Hartage.
I second.
We got a motion and a second. Anybody have any additions? Anybody opposed? Minutes are approved. First order of business, resolution authorizing the rejection of bids received for the procurement of bus midlife overhaul labor, IFB B44856. Mr. William Taylor.
Good morning, Mr.
Maintenance.
Good morning, Mr. Griffin, Mr. Parker, and the members of the Operations and Safety Committee. May I direct your attention to agenda item number 2, requesting resolution authorizing the rejection of bids received for the procurement of bus midlife overhaul labor, contract number IFB B44856. The requested resolution authorizes the general manager and CEO or his delegate to reject all bids received for this contract. Next slide, the highlights for this contract. It is a firm fixed unit price contract and will be utilized on an as-need basis, meaning we're not obligated to expend the total contract value. The contract term is for 3 years base with 2 one-year options. This is a federally funded contract at 80%. The current contract specifications for the DBE goal is 5%. 5 bids were received. The lowest bid was $3,653,200. The lowest bidder is Associated Fuel Systems Incorporated. Let's go to the next slide. The reason for recommendation, after further review of the technical specifications, we recognize the opportunity to restructure our DBE goal from 5% to 20%. How we arrived here, first worth mentioning, the whole intent for this labor contract is to subsidize our transit bus midlife overhaul program with some human capital. Currently, our overhaul shop bus technician vacancy rate is 25%, meaning we are understaffed in that shop. So what we've done is thought we'd get a contract in place with some skilled labor to help us complete our midlife overhaul program. When we drill down into our overhaul shop, we have at least about 10 techs vacant in that position, which really puts a deficit in our human labor for completing our midlife program. That's 10 of 16 positions that's vacant. So the reason why that is because of the vacancies in our operating shops. We fill our operating facilities with techs first and follow up with filling our heavy maintenance facilities second. So this is the reason for initially requesting skilled labor support in this area. This is our first labor contract with numerous technical tasks involved as far as I could remember. And for those MARTA board members that had an opportunity to visit our Browns Mill heavy maintenance facility earlier this year, you did witness the complexity involved in overhauling a transit bus by removing and replacing engine and transmission packages and many other bus components, restoring the vehicle to a state of good repair. Well, with that challenge, our bus engineering department provided a better understanding of technical specifications to our diversity and inclusion department, helping us as a team identify hopefully additional opportunities for DBE participation in this procurement. At this time, the authority's staff recommends the committee recommend to the full MARTA board this resolution authorizing the rejection of bids received for the procurement of bus midlife overhaul labor. Thank you. Are there any questions or comments?
Let me get a motion first. Anybody, could I have a motion?
So moved, Alpine.
Got a motion?
Second, Ash.
Okay, motion second. All right, questions?
I've got a question, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir, Mr. Pond.
I recall looking at some of the budget issues, there was a significant amount of overtime by very few people in the maintenance area where they had very specialized technical skills. I would assume the end game here is to try to reduce large volumes of time and a half overtime, a significant part of that. Long term, looking forward.
Absolutely, Mr. Pond. Our goal is to eventually one day utilize overtime at a minimum until we get these vacant positions filled and we get caught up on some of our maintenance projects and repairs. Then we'd have that opportunity to reduce that overtime.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else? Any other questions? You know, Mr. Taylor and Jeff, Mr. Parker, it seems like we're addressing an issue that was presented in the audit, the big audit 7-8 years ago of employees versus contractors and how we utilized and how we balanced. And it looks like we're making an effort. Ms. Bomar's program a while ago, Mr. Taylor found that we're trying to find a good balance between employees versus contractors. And I commend you for that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you pointing that out. You know, while William does have vacancies in his department, we have made significant progress in the hiring of. Right. He's had significantly more vacancies, so this is an opportunity to set some of that work. So.
All right. Any other questions? If not, anybody object to this resolution? Does anybody abstain? Motion's approved. All right. Next item is resolution authorizing the procurement of body-worn cameras for the MARTA Police Department. Chief Cryer.
Good morning, Chairman Griffin and the rest of the committee. Chief Cryer here. I haven't met a lot of you face to face, so I think this is the first time I'll speak to a few of you, but I'm looking forward to working with you in the future. Next slide, please. These two pieces of equipment that we're going to speak of today, I'm asking for a resolution authorizing the award of a single source contract for the procurement of our body-worn cameras and what we call our CEDWs, better known as a taser. Taser is a brand name. But as we know, in our current climate in law enforcement, public expectations are high about our transparency about what our officers are doing and how they do it. And these two pieces of equipment are vital to that. One being the body-worn camera, and the other is the taser, of course. We want to make sure that we take out as much of the human error factor as possible, and I believe this contract will do that. Next slide, please. Where we are now, our current contract with utility expires December 31st of this year. Our current camera is not compatible with our taser that we carry, and it's only able to be carried in our outer vest carrier. You can't mount it on a raincoat or a uniform shirt or a winter coat. It doesn't communicate with other cameras that are in the location similar to where the camera is being used. And of course, one feature that it does not have is a buffering feature, which captures the 2 minutes prior to the activation of the camera. And I'll go into more details about that in a few minutes. And our current software is separated. So our software for our cameras is separated and not the same as what we use for our tasers. And of course, now our cameras and our tasers will be non-servable at the end of the year. If you can look at this slide, this is where our current camera is located on that outer vest carrier that the officers have. That little small brass circle there is where the camera is. And there's no other options for the officers to carry that camera anywhere else. Next slide, please. So the company Axon provides capabilities that are very unique, and this is why we're going single source. It communicates with the other cameras, so if an officer turns their camera on, other officers that are in the vicinity, their camera will automatically turn on. So we'll have multiple views of the incident. It has a buffering option. So when you turn the camera on at the beginning of the shift, it's constantly buffering. So when the officer decides to hit the camera and turn it on, it will actually catch 2 minutes prior to the officer hitting that button. That's a unique feature of the Axon Camera. Also with their taser, when that taser is deployed, the body-worn camera will also automatically turn on and capture that incident. It also has a unique piece of equipment that will attach to the officer's sidearm holster, and it's called signal sidearm. And I'll show you a picture of it. But what that does is when the officer pulls that weapon out of the holster, it will automatically activate the body-worn camera that the officer has on. Again, we can use this camera on any outerwear, so we're not restricted to just the vest carrier. And we'll use the same software called evidence.com for both the body-worn camera and the taser. All the software updates are done automatically through the company, and we have an extended battery life of 12 hours compared to our current, which is about 8. Next slide, please. These are the pieces of equipment. Of course, the camera and the taser, everybody's pretty familiar with. But this little device on the right, signal sidearm, is much bigger in the picture. But that will attach to the officer's holster, and that will turn that body-worn camera on the minute the officer pulls the weapon out of the holster. Next slide, please. This is what it looks like on different platforms. Like I mentioned, you can carry it pretty much anywhere. It has a very strong magnetic back that the officer will put on the other side of the garment that they're wearing. So you can pretty much carry that anywhere on a jacket, raincoat, or a uniform shirt. Next slide. So just to hit the highlights, we're asking for a single source because of these unique capabilities. It has a 2-minute buffering prior to activation. Other cameras will activate when they're in close proximity of the officer. The taser and the signal sidearm will activate the body-worn camera. The taser is included in the cost of the body-worn camera contract. We'll have a single software platform for all the equipment. And we have various mounting options compared to just one. The current contract, DBE was not required. And again, talking to Ms. Nash, because of the uniqueness of this contract and the equipment that's going to be provided, there's no opportunity for DBE in this contract. But Axon will be required to provide an after affirmative action plan. And of course, it's a 5-year contract for both the body-worn camera and the taser at $3.322 million. With that, I'll open it up to any questions you have.
Could I have a motion to approve?
This is Ash. I move to approve, and then I have a question at the appropriate time.
Let me get a second.
Hardage seconds.
All right, Mr. Ash.
Chief, I appreciate it. Nice to make your acquaintance again. And maybe this is a question for Ms. Nash. I'm curious about, it says Axon will be required to provide an affirmative action plan. What does that mean? What as a practical matter will that amount to?
Sure, Mr. Ash. As part of the DBE program, we're required to actually get an affirmative action plan from our vendors, and it's really a plan that essentially says that they won't discriminate based on the Title VII reasons: race, gender, nationality, and all those types, religion, all those types of reasons. It doesn't require the extensive depth of what most people think of as in an affirmative action plan. It's just a very general plan that lays out the makeup of their company through a EEO1 report, and just affirms that they will not discriminate, and that they will make sure that their subcontractors are not discriminating.
Paula, can I just add something real quick?
Sure.
So you know, our DBE program requires firms to partner with other firms who are disadvantaged business. This affirmative action plan is really a look at the internal workings of the company itself and whether they've got the right policies and procedures and actions that demonstrate that they're not doing things that are illegal. Paula, doesn't it also require them to report, you know, the race and genders of their employees and the profile of their employees and things like that?
Yes, it does. That's through we call that an EEO1 report, but yes, it requires them to report all that information. Yes.
So this we're looking at the internal working of the company itself, Robbie.
I appreciate that. And Chief, I want to say that I agree wholeheartedly with the idea. I mean, I think these cameras have proved to be a valuable tool for both the officers and for the public that they are serving. I like the idea of the buffering, particularly when we're talking about activation upon weapons drawing, because it's what happens. I mean, obviously what happens after the weapon is drawn matters a whole lot, but how they got to that point also matters a heck of a lot too. So thank you for the thoughtfulness of this approach, and for, you know, I feel like MARTA's working to continue to be best in class in terms of its public safety interaction with the public. And that's, I think, particularly in these days and times, is a really important thing. So I'm strongly supportive. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate the support.
Thank you, Mr. Ash. Any other questions?
Oh, yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
One of the costs, having been involved in this at a local level before, one of the tremendous costs involved in this, Chief, is the storage of these videos, how long you store them, and where they're stored and how they're kept up with. And also, when you get a request for open records, or you get a request, somebody has to review it, and then is there redaction involved in it, and how that's handled, and what are the costs? Where are those costs covered, or are they included in this proposal?
The great thing about technology, Mr. Floyd, is that we've gotten away from servers, and all of the video storage now is on the cloud. So it is included in the contract, and MARTA dictates how long we keep that video and for what purposes.
Okay, thank you. And so there's no extra cost involved in this. But how many open records request acts does MARTA get with regard to these type things, and who handles that kind of stuff? Somebody in your office, I'm assuming.
Yes, sir. Depending on where the request comes in, will be funneled to Ms. O'Neill's team, and the legal department will review the request, and it'll be a decision made jointly with the legal team, Mr. Parker, and the police department on when and where it's released.
Okay. And just as a reminder to me, how long right now does MARTA keep one of these videos?
So currently the policy says 180 days, unless there's something unique to it, like if it's a criminal investigation, or if we know that it's going to be a legal matter that MARTA will have to handle, we'll keep that for 30 months. It's a current policy.
And one more question. Having talked to the chief last time about this, there was, as I remember, the video camera, and the company that you all are replacing is a Decatur company. So in full disclosure, I am familiar with them. Had some sort of communication capabilities, like a phone that you had some sort of communication capability with, or monitoring capability. Is that included? Is that part of this camera also?
I'm not familiar with what you're asking. I know the camera can do activation for BOLOs, for lookouts for people that are wanted or missing, and this will do that also. But I'm not quite sure what you're asking about the phone. I don't know what that is.
Well, quite honestly, Chief, I'm not sure either. So I'll accept that answer. Then thank you very much.
Absolutely.
All right. Any more questions? All right. Could anybody object to the motion? Anybody abstain? Motion's approved.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. You got your cameras.
Thank you, sir.
Well, you got it to go to the board at least.
Yes.
First step. Gina Major's going to give us a briefing on fire safety now. Gina, Assistant General Manager for Safety and Quality Assurance.
Thank you. Good morning. Chairman Griffin, Vice Chairwoman Ivy, Mr. Parker, and members of the Ops and Safety Committee. Today's briefing will be on fire safety prevention here at MARTA. Next slide, please. All right, we're in November now, but October was Fire Safety Prevention Month. The National Fire Protection Association in 1922 named the second week of October Fire Prevention Week in commemoration of the Great Chicago Fire in 1871. Today, Fire Prevention Week and month is celebrated by raising fire safety awareness and educating families, students, employees, and communities across the United States. So with that, we would like to share and bring awareness to fire safety initiatives going on here at MARTA. Next slide. So on the screen is a splashboard of fire prevention activities across our bus and rail operations, as well as our facilities. The activities include tangible devices and mechanisms such as the fire suppression systems on our bus vehicles and our fire protection system and tunnel ventilation upgrades for rail. We then have response type initiatives such as our fire extinguisher check program and our fire marshal program. And I'm going to highlight some of those in the next few slides. Next slide, please. So first, I'm going to talk about bus and fire safety prevention. The major components of fire safety for buses are fire suppression and gas detection. The first photo is showing the fire suppression control panel, which alerts, and it's also showing the actual manual release button for fire suppression. So this is how it looks on our diesel buses. The second photo is of a fire suppression dry agent cylinder, which is carried on all buses in the event of an actual fire. And then the last photo is showing the control panel for gas detection and fire suppression on our CNG buses. Again, the control panel gives alerts to the bus operators as a preventative before a fire actually occurs. Next slide. So this photo gives a more close-up view of these tangible mechanisms and shows the location on our diesel buses. Of course, the control panel and manual release are right up front within reach of the bus operator. And the agent cylinder is located near the rear boarding door. Next slide. So similar with CNG or compressed natural gas buses, we see the control panel and manual release up front and dry agent cylinder located near the rear doors. The biggest difference between the diesel and CNG fire prevention systems is that there is no gas detection for the diesel buses. Diesel fuel exists in a liquid state. Thus, there is no detection system for gas particles and any leaks would be visible, whereas CNG fuel exists in a gas state only. Next slide. In rail, we'll look at some tangible fire prevention initiatives, and first is the CQ400 new rail car program itself. This program features a rail car design that minimizes combustible content. There's laboratory testing on the materials used and fire testing on materials such as the operator's seat, floor coverings, and door seals. There is also the use of fire retardant materials throughout where possible. Next slide. Now, our tunnel ventilation system is an ongoing event. As shown, this design allows for safe evacuation in a fire emergency. Now, the first scenario in the photo shows an example of poor ventilation where the smoke is inside the evacuation path. The second scenario shows better ventilation with airflow directing smoke out of the path, but still not ideal. Whereas the last scenario shows no smoke in the evacuation path and airflow actually being directed away from the passengers. So that's more of the ideal state. And as you can see, the TVS has been going on for a while. The project is currently at 65% completion. Next slide. Now, in 2019, MARTA completed fire protection system upgrades for 97 of its facilities, including stations, rail and bus facilities, and administrative buildings. The state-of-the-art fire protection system includes features such as a centrally located monitoring hub that's capable of communicating and reporting conditions at all facilities, a self-health monitoring capability to help target maintenance efforts, emergency communication and paging both locally and remotely, increased intelligence of system components, and this intelligence is integrated with our fare gates, elevators, and other systems to facilitate safe evacuations when necessary. And in addition to being feature-rich, the new system is more environmentally friendly and allows for better spare parts availability, as this is now a compatible system across most MARTA facilities. Next slide. So our emergency evacuations when passengers are trapped in an elevator is a serious matter that requires specialized training. This training is outlined in the American National Standards Guide for emergency personnel, and we do have staff trained on these regulated evacuation procedures. Next slide. This slide highlights the improved use of technology for our fire protection systems across the authority. For example, the inspection reports for our sprinklers, hydrants, extinguishers, and detection systems are submitted electronically by our vendors. We have our facilities building automation system, which shows real-time status of our fire dampers, duct detectors, and our fire alarm control panel. It also shows real-time data for our emergency generator status, auto transfer switch, and UPS battery condition as required to maintain regulatory compliance with the National Fire Protection Agency. Next slide. Now we have a very expansive fire extinguisher program where we also use technology via mobile devices and barcodes to track inspection services performed and discrepancies identified during those inspections. We also track units that are removed from service for repairs. Next slide. In addition to these initiatives, we provide fire training to our local jurisdiction partners, such as cities of Atlanta and Decatur, the airport, and our northern partners in Sandy Springs. And since 2013, we have provided over 2,200 instructor hours and hosted more than 7,000 firefighters from these local jurisdictions. Next slide. Now, wayside fires are an unwanted yet common occurrence within the rail transit industry. And to combat and mitigate the risk associated with wayside fires, we've developed a log which tracks our wayside fires and categorizes them as shown. So for example, this log features a mapping of all wayside fires by year, 2018, 2019, and 2020, associated with vegetation, brush, or debris that exists outside the station platform. So focusing on the root causes as it relates to these categories allows us to apply a broader brush in targeting our efforts throughout the system. Next slide. Now, the Continuous Improvement Business Unit, which is within the Department of Safety and Quality Assurance, is also using Power BI heat maps to visually analyze where our challenges live. So some of the corrective actions include, as shown here, again, dry vegetation, an aging infrastructure, worn timber ties, a gap in the third rail causing arcs, et cetera. And then again, some of the corrective actions that we have in place to mitigate these. Next slide. All right, the last area I would like to tell you about is our Fire Safety Marshal Program associated with emergency evacuation drills. We perform these drills annually at 15 major MARTA facilities. We have a safety marshal task force of 300 to 400 personnel, and they are identified during these drills by their orange hats. So just this year, we added evacuation drills for our second and third shifts, making our program even more comprehensive. For each facility, we have assembly areas that are confirmed, and in some instances, the assembly areas are marked so that staff are visually clear on where they should assemble. We have been tracking our performance on evacuation drills since 2007. The score includes factors such as the amount of time it takes to evacuate the entire facility. And as you can see, the graph shows our performance has continually improved, with the highest rating achieved last year at 95%. We are currently conducting evacuation drills for 2020, and we'll have those results sometime later this month. Next slide. So that concludes my briefing. Fires are rare when care is there, is our slogan here. And I'll go to our next slide to say thank you. And again, tout our safe by choice, not by chance.
All right, thank you, Gina. Any questions or comments for Gina?
Mr. Griffin, I have one question. This is Ms. Hartage.
Yes.
You back in several slides ago when you talked about the tunnel ventilation system, you said we were 65% complete, and I know that's been going on for years, and that's no one's fault. But what's the timeline for us to be 100% complete on those tunnels?
Gina, I'm on the call. Would you like me to answer that?
Yes, thank you, Marsha.
Sure. Yeah, so Ms. Hartage is a great question. So we are expecting to be complete by next summer with the program. We are now, we're now waiting. We have some environmental mitigation, some asbestos that's being dealt with in several of our tunnel stations. And so we are working around that issue, but fully expect to be done by next summer.
Thank you, Marsha. I remember that we were going to have some of those issues, but right after we approved all this, they had that big issue up in Washington, and we haven't forgotten. So thank you.
Absolutely.
You're exactly right. We haven't forgotten Washington. Any other questions or comments for Gina? If not, thank you. Ms. Ivy and I, in our pre-brief this time, felt like that the KPIs, which normally we're just putting at the end of the agenda and not discussing at all, it's left up to each individual board member, but there were a couple of things that popped up in this month's KPIs for operations and safety, and we asked to add a briefing for us. So I'm going to ask Mr. Santiago Osorio and George Wright to give us a presentation on the KPIs on operations and safety.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Good morning, Chairman Griffin, Vice Chair Ivy, Mr. Parker, members of the Operations and Safety Committee. So I'm just going to kind of a high level, just go over the key performance indicators. Next slide, please. So I will be discussing 5 of the key performance indicators that are very important to bus operations. As you can see, on-time performance has a yellow check mark. That means that we met the grade. We just didn't quite get over the top. Mean distance between failures has a check mark that is green, which is exceed and meets the grade. And unfortunately, we have one that has an X and it's red, and I'll explain that as I get to it. Overtime and bus collisions. Next slide, please. So on-time performance at the end of fiscal year FY18, we ended in a very positive note, and then it drops down to the 78%, and it just continued on that trend all the way through the end of the year FY19. When we picked up on FY19 to FY20, as you can see on the chart, we made some progress, and it continued to go high, and we had some really positive notes there in December of FY20 with 78.09. But it's not quite where we want to get today. So when we ended the fiscal year, we still ended within that grade at the 77.4, and the story still continued to be positive today. Next slide. So this is where we stand today. We stand at 77.3. I'm very pleased to share with you that this year we have made some improvement. We're not quite at the goal. We are 1.2% away from the goal, and the goal is our goal in operations is to get it over the top. We had numerous efforts that we had put in place. We are focusing on 3 performing routes, the worst performing routes. We've been doing that since late June, and I'm very happy to report that we have seen an average of 5% increase on those 3 routes. And as a result of that average increase on those 3 routes, we are now moving that concept forward to extend those efforts to the next 3 routes per facility. So we will be looking at a total of 12 routes instead of just 3. So we're hoping to come back to the board and hoping to get that goal over the top in the next few months. Next slide, please. Mean distance between failures. This is the bus maintenance KPI. This is a very positive story. Allow us to say for the maintenance department, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the men and women for the maintenance department that worked so hard, especially during the crisis, to keep our rolling stock safe, clean, reliable, and ready to go, for our everyday service. We're also very proud to have a fleet that is a modern fleet that our customers can enjoy and they can count on it. Something happens to the slide.
WebEx didn't like it, apparently.
Awesome. Thank you. Next slide. That's fine. Just leave it there. Our next KPI is our customer trend. This is the slide that during my introduction, I explained that we have a red X. This is something that we're not very proud of it. We continue to work really hard, but the positive story here is that our complaints are dropping. As you can see very clearly in the charts, there's a significant difference between FY19 and FY20. And next slide, please. So our bus customer service complaints, even though we have an X, that's because our expectations of our service is really, really, we have a high level of expectations. We do have our our KPI is 8 complaints per 100,000 boardings. So if you really put that into context, that's 0.008% of complaints. As it stands today, the trend is still showing a positive trend towards getting to the goal. We're standing at a 10.74, which is a significant difference between the prior years at a 13.5, 14, or 15 boardings, 15 complaints per 100,000 boardings. Next one. The next one is just, I just wanted to paint the picture of how significant, next slide, please. Just wanted to paint the picture of how significant the decrease is. And we looked at the top 10 complaints. As you can see, FY19 versus FY20, those 10 complaints are drastically or dramatically dropped. It doesn't mean that those areas that only have 1 or 2 complaints are not of an importance to us. We just wanted to paint the picture to the board so you can see the areas of improvement and how well the men and women and our teams are working to produce these numbers. Next slide, please.
Hey, can I just make a comment on the complaints, Santiago, that the very first slide that Santiago showed, the numbers being down, I think it's important to repeat that the numbers are down even pre-COVID. So, you know, COVID didn't affect us until obviously March, but when you look at the numbers in January and February, we have a significant decline. And then really what's happening is that where the ridership has bottomed out, that's what's the biggest effect on this metric. The, you know, complaints per 100,000 riders is really being severely impacted, where the total number of complaints is just significantly down from last year.
Go ahead. Thank you, Jeff. Next slide. So the overtime percent, this is the KPI that will report to the board. This is a very important slide. As you can see, FY19, we ended basically a 13% higher than the FY18 budget. But in FY20, we end up 14% lower than the prior year, with a total saving of a $2.45 million savings. This is basically, and this is even counting with the 25% vacancies that maintenance has to deal with it. So this is very commendable. This is a very important KPI to me. When I got here, I saw how important this was to Jeff to reduce overtime. Holly has some very clear directions on how we need to tackle this. So we went to work with our transportation and maintenance partners. Transportation basically monitors very closely the overtime, and they optimize the extra board uses to make sure that we don't waste manpower. They reduce the numbers by, you know, keeping the standby operators to the minimum before any overtime person gets to work overtime. And so it's the same concept for maintenance. Next slide, please. And finally, bus collisions. Our goal is to be at a 3.80. That's the goal for 100,000 miles that we ride. And currently we're standing at a 3.13 with an aggregated rate of a 2.81. This is not by any accidents. This is just by, I got to give credit where it's due. This is by the dedication of the safety department, transportations, and all those other individuals that touch our vehicles to make sure that they're reliable and they, you know, and they're safe, and then also that they put all these campaigns, educations. They monitor all our hot spots to make sure that our operators are aware of areas that can be a high risk or they can increase the chances of having accidents. They do a very good job coaching and training and putting campaigns out there to alert our employees, so they can be on the lookout, so that way our accidents can minimize and we can keep our employees safe and they can stay here and perform their duties as we plan to. So with that, I have the pleasure to introduce George Wright. George Wright is the Deputy Chief of Rail Operations, and he will be talking to the board regarding the rail KPIs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sarah.
Good morning, Chairman Griffin, Vice Chair Ivy, Mr. Parker, Mr. Greenwood, and members of the Operations and Safety Committee. Go ahead and advance the slide, please. I'm going to take a few minutes to report on some of the key performance indicators, or KPIs, for rail. These KPIs were selected because they're the most customer-centric of the rail KPIs. In other words, our performance or attainment versus the target/goal is an outcome that our customers directly feel, and which in turn influences their perceptions and decisions about MARTA. Finally, I will close the briefing with our intended future focus regarding KPIs and performance management. Next slide, please. Mean distance between service interruptions, or MDBSI. This KPI measures the mean distance in train miles between lost and delayed trips. As you can see, the trend is currently positive on a target of 475 train miles, and the target has in fact been surpassed the last 5 of 6 months. Impacts and leading indicators to this KPI are the performance of the railcar fleet, the performance of our infrastructure, and what I mean by that, the state of our track and switches, the efficiency of our power distribution and our train control systems, Other impacts include our planning and execution around single tracking events, especially as we work through the track renovation project that's going on right now, operator performance, and the frequency of adverse patron interfaces, and like we experienced last Thursday, weather events. Next slide, please. On-time performance, or OTP. This KPI in rail measures how closely service runs to schedule. Departures from origin and arrivals to destination are considered on time if made no longer than 5 minutes after scheduled times. As you can see, the results are consistently above target, and the trend is currently positive on a target of 95%. The leading indicators or impacts to this KPI are the same as with mean distance between service interruptions. Next slide, please. Absenteeism, and when I talk about absenteeism here, I'm talking about unscheduled absenteeism versus overtime. The trend is positive for overtime. However, we're experiencing a negative trend with unscheduled absenteeism, where COVID and FMLA are the major contributors. Now, I included these KPIs in concert because it's sometimes the case that there's a correlation between the two. There is, in fact, a customer experience outcome component with both KPIs. Absenteeism is pretty obvious. If excessive, it can hamper our ability to deliver on the customer or on the service, on our service proposition in an optimal manner. While in terms of excess overtime, not only are there budgetary or safety implications, it's also important to keep in mind that excess usage can have implications detrimental to delivering a world-class customer experience because of our reduced ability to respond to surges in demand if our employees are already working a lot of overtime. Next slide, please. Elevator availability. This KPI measures the percentage of service hours during which elevators are available for customer use. The results are consistently above the target of 98.5, and we're currently experiencing a positive trend. Now, there are a few important comments of relevance. One, we're in year 4 of a 10-year modernization rehab program. Units being rehabbed are in fact excluded from the availability calculation when out of service. On average, it takes about 10 average to rehab an elevator. Now, I do want to convey something that we're very cognizant of, that outcomes less than 100% availability with our elevators can and do have negative implications for our most vulnerable customers. What I mean to say here is that, you know, when you look at the graph here, our availability is above 99.5. However, if I'm a patron that is experiencing that 0.5 or 0.25 unavailability, I've been adversely impacted, and the trend or target attainment doesn't matter much. So there are a lot of things that we're doing to mitigate that reality. One, it's imperative that we make sure that the service alert tab on the website is timely, it's updated timely, and that it is accurate with the reroute instructions. It's also imperative that our operators make announcements. And we're going to be focusing on that behavior because we need to get really near perfect with that. There's also a third guardrail because we believe that this KPI is so important that we're deploying flip signs next to every elevator in the system. And these signs will provide a notification of status and provide guidance for rerouting if the elevator is out of service. So if the patron did not check the website, or the operator didn't make an announcement, or the announcement was missed, there is this third guardrail that we're deploying right now to help our patrons. Finally, we're working on establishing weekly versus monthly KPIs for our elevator and escalator mode to bring about additional performance rigor. For example, we will be adding a weekly suite of KPIs to the tracking and trending of elevator entrapments and the response time of our vendors to address outages and other disruptions to availability and experience. Next slide, please. Like with the elevators, escalator availability, this KPI measures the percentage of service hours during which escalators are available for customer use. The results are in fact above the target of 98.5, and we're currently experiencing a positive trend. We're also in year 4 of a 10-year rehab program with these units, and the same exclusion applies. We do not count these in the calculation when they're out being rehabbed. Informationally, we're averaging about 13 to 17 weeks to rehab, depending on the rise of the unit. Next slide. Rail complaints per 100,000 boardings. This KPI measures customer complaints about rail service per 100,000 rail passenger boardings. The results are consistently below the target of 1 complaint per 100,000 boardings, and there's currently a positive trend. That said, the 2 top reasons for calling in a complaint in rail are for delays and for the absence of or the quality of announcements, both PA and operator. Improving our performance in this area will be a major focus as we seek to raise our bar in performance. Next slide. We do see the efforts that we're pursuing to transform the station experience as a game-change vehicle to improve the customer-centric KPIs and performance in rail. I will be briefing the committee in a couple of weeks specifically on our station transformation efforts. Furthermore, with the station transformation, we're looking to identify and implement additional smart KPIs that are linked to the customer experience. Ultimately, our objective is to establish a direct linkage between the attainment of goals and targets through KPIs to performance management. The goal is to create a work environment where all employees are engaged and want to deliver a world-class experience through their performance to our customers. Next slide. Thank you, Chairman. That concludes my briefing.
Thank you very much. I want to thank both of you for your presentations. I think it's important that we hear from you and hear what's going on. So I really do appreciate it. And on behalf of the committee, we thank you. Are there any other matters to come before this committee? Are there any questions on the KPIs?
Hey, Jerry, I do want to say that, Axon.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for sharing that at this meeting, because there was some KPIs that I hadn't, I just wasn't aware that we were tracking when it comes to the performance on the bus and rail line. So that was helpful for me. So thanks for bringing that to the surface.
Thank you, Mr. Fraxel. Anything else to come before this committee? If not, we stand adjourned and we'll move to the next.
Chairman Firestone, would you like me to go ahead and do a roll for Business Management Committee?
Yes, Ms. Peters, go ahead and do a roll call.
Thank you. Roberta Abdul Salam, Robbie Ash, Jim Dorrit.
I'm here.
Thank you. Roderick Edmond, Bill Floyd.
I'm here.
Roderick Firestone.
Present.
Ryan Glover. Jerry Griffin.
Here.
Peter Hardage.
Here.
Alicia Ivy.
Present.
Russell McMurray. Alpon.
Present.
Rita Scott.
Present.
Christopher Tomlinson. Thomas Worthy. Mr. Chair, we have 8 board members present.
All right, thank you, Ms. Peters. I have before you the minutes for the 30th meeting. Can I get a motion to approve the business meeting for September 30th?
This is Hardage. I approve.
Second, Ivy.
Okay, Mrs. Hardage, Mrs. Ivy, motion and second the minutes. Are there any additions that we need to make to the minutes? Any changes? Okay, are there any objections to the minutes presented? Are there any abstentions? Okay, hearing none, the minutes have been approved. All right, the first item on the agenda is a resolution authorizing the solicitation of proposals for the procurement of consulting services for group benefit plans, RFP P46683. Stephen McClure, Director of Human Resources, you have the floor.
Good morning, Chairman Frierson, Business Management Committee members, Mr. Parker, Ms. Barrera, and others. I'm Stephen McClure, Director of Human Resources. I come to you today to request your approval of our resolution to solicit proposals for the procurement of consulting services for our business, for our benefit plans, group benefit plans, RFP P4683. Next slide. As you are aware, MARTA recently secured provider services for our comprehensive health insurance program that is available to approximately 4,500 employees, their families, and approximately 1,250 retirees. Next slide. Over the course of the next 5 years, MARTA has committed a significant financial investment of approximately $558.2 million to cover administrative service fees and anticipated claims costs for our benefit plans. These benefit plans became effective July 1 of this year and include distinct lines of coverages such as medical, pharmacy, dental, vision, critical illness, life and accidental death and dismemberment, our flexible spending account, and stop loss insurance. As shown in the previous slide, we are seeking to replace our current consulting contract to provide ongoing expertise to the Department of Human Resources and our small benefit unit to effectively implement and manage these plans. Next slide. For example, the benefit consultant will annually benchmark our plan offerings to the market. They'll monitor our utilization reports, analyze our claims costs, and make appropriate plan design recommendations that support our financial outlook. With our medical benefits, we anticipate that this service will also include a recommendation to implement a high deductible health plan coupled with a health savings account. Additionally, the consultant will monitor and enforce our newly negotiated service level agreements and performance guarantees with our plan providers. Additional services are listed here on the scope of services. Next slide. So in preparing the estimated financial cost of this project and request, we reviewed our historical spend data and solicited input from potential providers within the market. The proposed 5-year term, which comprised of 3 base years and 2 one-year options, the estimated cost is $622,500. And we know that this level of funding will secure a significant return on our investment through the services we've already mentioned. So in closing, I want to restate the recommendation that the Business Management Committee recommend approval to the Board of Directors authorizing the solicitation of proposals for the procurement of consulting services for our group benefit plans. Next slide. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. McClure. Can I get a motion and a second?
Jim Durrett, move approval.
Okay.
Ivy second.
Okay. All right, thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on this? Any questions? Okay, here now, I'd like to take a vote. Are there any objections to the resolution? Are there any abstentions to the resolution? Okay, hearing none, the resolution has been adopted. All right, the second item on the agenda is a resolution authorizing the modification of a contractual authorization for additional funds for the multifunctional printers, lease and maintenance service. This is a RFP P33231. Kirk Talbert, AGM Technology. You have the floor, Kirk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Frierson, committee members, Mr. Parker, and Mr. Hurley. This morning, I'm bringing for your consideration the resolution mentioned above to add funds to our current Canon copier contract. It's the contract that provides copiers, printers, fax machines for the agency. We began the contract in 2017, and the term of the contract with the 2 one-year extensions will take us out to March of 2022. However, the current funds will be exhausted prior to reaching the end of the contract. So we're requesting to add $192,380 to extend the contract through the end of the term. This will allow us to pay for 19 additional copiers and a multifunction printer that we have brought into the print service shop in order to lower costs.
Okay, Mr. Talbert, do we have any questions? All right, hearing none. Can I get a motion? Okay, motion approved. A second?
Second, Griffin.
Okay. Second by Mr. Griffin. All right. It's been properly moved in second. Are there any other discussions? Okay, hearing none. Are there any objections to the resolution that's been presented? Are there any abstentions to the resolution? Okay, hearing none, the resolution has been properly noted and approved. Thank you, Mr. Talbert. Okay, the next item that we have is a resolution authorizing the solicitation of proposals for procurement of the multifunctional printers. This is another lease and maintenance agreement, RFP P47640. Mr. Kirk Talbot, you have the floor again.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Members, this is a request to allow solicitation of proposals, so an RFP request, to solicit a new competitive lease for the multifunction printers, copiers.
Right.
And this is being requested now so that the RFP can conclude in time to begin when the current Canon contract terminates in March of 2022. One of the things that we'll be doing is looking at utilization changes of the current contract, given that we're currently operating in a distributed model with the office remote for some individual positions. We want to make sure that we're looking at the new utilization rates of copiers and printers and not simply going based on the historical pattern prior to COVID. But for this time, we're estimating an amount of $2.3 million in a 3-year term with 2 one-year option periods. This concludes my request.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Talbot. Do we have any questions to Mr. Talbot? All right, can I get a motion concerning the resolution? Can I motion in a second?
I move approval, Jim Durrett.
This is Frida Hartage, I'll second.
Okay, it's been properly moved in second. On board. Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none. Are there any objections to the resolution that's been presented? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the resolution has been adopted. Thank you, Mr. Talbot. Appreciate it very much. All right, the next item we have on the agenda is a briefing. Technology. Mr. Kirk Talbert, you have the floor again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members, Mr. Parker, Mr. Hurley. If you'll advance to the next slide, please. I'd like to provide a brief update on the state of technology for the organization. Be updating just a second. If you'll recall, I presented the state of technology in the early spring of this year, and this is a subsequent status update. So we'll be covering the period of time over the past. Everyone able to see the organizational overview slide? It would appear. We seem to be having some technical difficulties, ironically.
It moved back. There you go. That's the first slide. Okay.
That's
all right.
Where we want to be. All right. As you remember, our department is made up of 4 offices. We have the Office of Technology Applications, which supports the software that you typically run and see, and much software behind the scenes you do not. We have the Office of Infrastructure and Production, which operates the hardware, maintains it, and it's the support services, where we run our projects, run our service desk, we manage the business and contractual elements, and we manage inventory and supplies, and a newly created Office of Strategy and Innovation that we discussed, in which we focus on solution design and relationship management within the business. I would be remiss if I did not mention that in the past 6 months, the technology department has, I'm very proud to say, worked Herculean efforts that have aided MARTA to shift into and handle the COVID situation as fluidly as possible. We've taken the offices and we've allowed remote capabilities, transitioned, and even as much as this board meeting is operating under a web-based model. While not ideal, it did take a Herculean effort to be able to accomplish that shift during this time. In addition, we've had a number of strategic initiatives internally facing that I'd like to update you on. We've had continued improvement of our hardware and infrastructure, which leads to more reliable operations, increased storage, and improved backups and more resiliency. We've had a continual project to increase the quality and the reliability of our fiber network, which is what allows all of our rail centers, headquarters, bus operations to work consistently, stay connected, and have access to the resources they need. And one of the things that you've probably started noticing in our board updates and across even in this presentation is we've begun an effort to deploy business analytics tools throughout the organization.
Right.
Our BI. It's allowed us to track overtime, ridership, the COVID situation, and a number of others. This is an ongoing effort that we'll be continuing to provide, but it allows everyone in the agency to be able to respond more rapidly and more accurately to data as it happens. Another major accomplishment, which we would like to bring to your attention, is the implementation of encumbrances. This was an Oracle enhancement we completed successfully in July 1, which, if you'll recall, we briefed slightly on last update, in which we're able to manage finances and procurements more accurately, and very importantly, we're able to do automated federal reporting. Allows us to track not only what we have spent, but those contractual commitments that we've made for the future. In addition, we're working on internal and external applications, such as Lost and Found Management System, which will be released. Target is November 15th, so in the next few weeks.
Right.
A tool which will help our riders and patrons to identify when they've lost items and help our internal operations staff be able to better track those requests and find those items. And as most of you are probably aware, we're continuing to work on a board management platform. We anticipate it will be done probably early part of next calendar year. We're going through the procurement process now, but it will be a significant improvement to the audio, the video, connectivity, and You'll notice improvements as well in the boardroom once we return to on-site operations. Focusing on customer-facing improvements, we continue to work through the current process to select a new computer-aided dispatch and automatic vehicle location system. This is the automated system that MARTA uses to track where the buses should be versus where they are, how they're performing on the schedule, communicating with operators, and a number of other functions. Our current system is over 15 years old, and we are looking forward to being able to select and implement that product in the very near future. One of the things you may not be aware of is there's significant effort towards working with our regional partners. We're happy to say that the region collectively was awarded a grant from the FTA to develop a regional mobility app. We're looking at a late 2021 launch. This will be a regionally developed open source platform that will replace the MARTA on the Go application, but additionally it will provide much needed functionality via web and open interfaces that will allow us to do a number of much needed improvements to our customer interface when we're looking at it from a mobile or web-based standpoint. We're also working with our regional partners, the ATL, Cobb, Gwinnett, ARC, and CERTA, at potentially endorsing a third-party mobile app. So many people, as you've traveled, probably encountered apps like Move It, Transit, that are commercially developed third-party transportation applications. And by endorsing a competitively selected third-party application, MARTA would benefit from the data that those applications collect about trips that were taken and trips that were planned but never taken on those third-party apps. Given their international deployments, they have a very large customer base, and it makes it much easier for us to share our trip and real-time information with them, and in exchange they would share the trip planning information that they gather. We continue to work to improve MARTA's brand through quality data improvements. We're not waiting for the CAD AVL project to be fully implemented. We're currently in the process of testing out an improved bus location system, which will give us much more timely updates to vehicle location. Currently, we survey our vehicles about once every 2 minutes for the bus locations. The technology that we're looking at and evaluating so far has gone very positively. Surveying vehicles will have location information about our vehicles much more frequently and more accurately. Looking forward to integrating that in as soon as possible. And we're also working with the Department of Research and Analysis to see if we can take real-time information about bus crowding and make those available, as we've seen in some other properties. Finally, for the customer base, I'm pleased to announce that we are nearing the completion of the hardware installation for the AVIS project, the Automated Visual Information System, and Visual Information System, rail signs that you'll see at the stations. At the time of crafting this presentation, we lacked only 8 signs to be installed out of 326, and all 4,540 speakers have been physically installed. What that means is we now go through the process of testing and certifying each of them, setting sound levels, and making sure that the information displayed on those signs is updated. If you'll recall, we did a brief presentation on the new formatting for the signs, something I'm very excited about and looking forward to making available to our riders and patrons. And finally, another very happy to report, we have successfully deployed the mobile application, otherwise known as Grease Mobile, for payment services. We have not done a full marketing campaign yet because we're still rolling out the final functionality, but at this time, you're able to use the application. It's available on both Android and Apple platforms. It works for bus, rail, and streetcar, and we're in the process of adding paratransit and discount fares onto the platform, but at this time it is fully functional. You can see on the right utilization and adoption of the platform, which again, this has been absent any marketing or any advertising campaigns whatsoever. This is solely word of mouth. So this has been a very very positive accomplishment that we're proud of. Going forward, we'll be completing the full marketing campaign December, January timeframe, rolling out full paratransit fare types, and then we'll begin looking at integrating with our regional partners, integrating with the existing Breeze card system, the AFC 2.0 project that we briefed you about previously, looking at developing single-use promotional and integrated payments. And we're also looking at this platform for options in terms of advanced fare policy discussions involving fare capping, transfers between all modes, and equitable relationship with streetcar. This concludes the formal portion of my presentation.
Hey, Rod, you're muted. There you go.
Okay. All right. Do we have any questions for Mr. Talbot? I do want to say, Mr. Talbot, I'm glad to hear of the mobility tracking project, how it's moving forward. I know that's something that we've talked about at previous meetings, and it's just great to see this new technology begin to grow and get embraced so that we can move forward, because the flexibility to be able to pay for your transit service throughout all different means, whether it's micro or whether it's rail or bus, is critical, and that's what's happening now. So I'm really excited to see that happen and move forward. So we don't have any questions for Mr. Talbot. Can I get a motion to approve the resolution in a second?
This is Frida Hardage. I move to approve it.
Well, I'm sorry. This is just a briefing from Mr.
It's
Talbot.
just a briefing. You don't need, that's right. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. Yeah, this is just a briefing. So, all right. Yeah, it is just a briefing. Okay.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
We got one more brief.
Oh, no.
Yes, we do. And this is the financial piece that we need to look at. So, yes, we do.
Yay, Kevin.
So, end of the year, FYI 2020 financial highlights and key financial performance indicators. Mr. Calvin Hewley. Mr. Kevin Hewley, you have the floor.
Actually, I will be presenting on Calvin's behalf. Kevin, this is Cynthia Beasley.
Okay.
Good morning, Mr. Frison, Mr. Parker, and members of the Business Management Committee. Again, I am Cynthia Beasley, and I'm sitting in on the interim CFO, Kevin Hurley's behalf to present the financial highlights and the KPIs. So you have before you the year-end 2020 unaudited financial highlights, before and after exceptional items, and I will provide you more details on exceptional items momentarily. Next slide, please. This particular slide shows fiscal year 2020 operations performance before exceptional items, focusing in on net revenues. As you can see, we have an unfavorable variance to budget of $37.7 million. And this, of course, is impacted by COVID-19. Our net expenses are favorable to budget by $22.4 million. And most of the underrun for our expenses are also associated with COVID-19. So our net deficit before exceptional items for the year is $15.3 million deficit. An exceptional item is basically just a financial transaction that is outside of our day-to-day business operation, or a transaction that is not likely to be repeated. Due to the materialities of these particular transactions, we chose to disclose or present them separately. Next page, please. This is a summary page that shows fiscal year 2020 operations performance after exceptional items. Again, net deficit before exceptional items is $15.3 million, of which we just disclosed on the previous slide. We have two exceptional items. One is an expense item. We are labeling it our GASB expenses. We have two GASBs that we have to follow, GASB 68, which is pension related, and GASB 75, which is OPEB related. And the net of the two added up to be $13 million in additional expenses. And we also have one exceptional revenue. In 2020, MARTA was awarded $299 million in CARES Act funding. In 2020, we recognized $82.7 million of the $299 million. Next page, please. This is a detail page, and it shows details of fiscal year 2020 operations. If we focus in on the revenues, sales tax, as you can see, our sales tax, we perform below budget or unfavorable to budget by $17.6 million. This, of course, is impacted by COVID-19. It's worth noting that prior to COVID-19, we were favorable to budget in this category. Our title ad valorem tax, we are $8.5 million favorable to budget. Federal assistance, we are $8.7 million unfavorable to budget. However, we need to keep in mind that we did receive an $82.7 million of CARES Act revenue, which is also federal assistance. We just are presenting it separately here. And our passenger revenue is $22.3 million unfavorable to budget. And of course, we are impacted here by COVID-19. Overall, our net revenues are $37.7 million, excluding any exceptional items. If we look at our expenses, our salaries and wages are $17.8 million favorable to budget, and we do have a number of vacancies. Our overtime is $5.7 million unfavorable to budget. Most of our categories were favorable to budget. However, contractual services were unfavorable by $5 million, and other non-labor were unfavorable by $1.4 million. And capital charges, this is where we charge our labor to capital charges, is initially recorded in operating a Fund 1000, and we have to reclass it over to capital. So here you're seeing a $12.1 million, which is unfavorable to budget. Our net expenses for exceptional items is $22.4 million. And our net deficit. Yes.
Go ahead and finish. I'm sorry, Cynthia. I just want to mention something, but I'll do it before you move off this slide. Go ahead. I thought you were done. Sorry.
Okay. And our net deficit before exceptional items are $15.3 million. And of course, we have the two exceptional items that I mentioned before, the GASB expenses, the CARES Act revenue, and we ended our year with a net surplus after exceptional items of $54.4 million. Okay, Mr. Parker.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention on the Gatsby expenses, one of the items that was unfavorable was an adjustment that was made related to the non-represented pension plan. The actuarialist had recommended that we lower the not sure the exact word, but what the planned return was, and I believe it was moved down to 5.5%. We are now projecting over years to come that the rate of return for that fund will be 5.5%. That obviously created a higher pension liability, but it should be noted that will put us in a better position, assuming that the markets are lower. So I think that was a wise thing that, although had a negative impact to our bottom line. Is that right, Cynthia? Did I get that right?
Yes, most of it. Yes, for the most part. The biggest part of the variance we have to look at, although that did impact it, but as it relates to the expense that we have to show, we have to look at what we projected for the market and what we actually received for the market. So yes, It's a yes and a no. You were on point, but most of it is dealing with how the market performed.
Okay, all right.
Next page. Next page. This particular page shows how much of the sales tax receipt we needed to fund operations for the year. And as you can see, our total sales tax receipt is $525 million, and the $525 million is for, of course, operating and capital. Of that, we needed $263 million in order to fund our operating expenses before exceptional items. So we needed right at 50% of our total sales tax receipts before the exceptional items. Of course, we received in the CARES Act revenue, so our sales tax required after exceptional items is $193 million, which is a lot less. And the percentage of sales tax required to fund operating expenses after exceptional items is 37%.
Right, okay.
Okay, and if we go to the next page, page 6, overtime expenses. We pretty much trended above budget for most of the year prior to COVID-19. And as you can see, in March, our overtime expenses peaked. The last 3 months of the year, we were trending below budget and below prior year. Next page, please. Now we can segue to the year-end key financial performance indicators. Next page, please. Our revenues trended above expenses throughout the year, with the exception of July and December. Because of COVID-19, expenses were greater than our revenues in March, April, and May. In June, we recognized $82.7 million in CARES Act revenue, and we also recognized $13 million in GASB expenses, leading to a big spike in revenues and a big spike in expenses in the month of June. Next page, please. Net operating revenues and expenses. This is basically the same chart as previously presented, except this chart shows what our expenses would be if we did not have or recognize the CARES Act funds in June. As you can see, had we not recognized the CARES Act fund, we would have come in at $31.8 million in revenue, way below our $60.2 million in expenses. Next page, please. Sales and ad valorem tax revenue. As you can see here, we were ahead of budget and prior year for most of 2020. March, April, May, and June are all impacted by COVID-19, where we are performing below actual and budget. Next page. Passenger revenue. Blue, of course, indicates actual, red indicates budget, and gray indicates prior year. As you can see, prior to COVID-19, our passenger revenue trended above budget throughout the year. However, we were also consistently below budget, below prior year performance. This was even before COVID-19. And of course, in the month of March, we have a deep dip related to COVID-19. May, April, May, and June are below budget and prior year, and particularly for budget, it is related to COVID-19. Next page, please. This concludes my presentation. I am happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mrs. Beasley. All right, thank you. We understand what has happened with the impact of this healthcare crisis on us as a transportation system. So we're fortunate that we have had some relief with what's happening with the CARES Act. But once again, the long-term trend is that it's going to impact us in the long term as we begin to come out of this and have to deal with, our ridership coming back. So, but thank you very much for KBIs. We appreciate it very much. I have no other questions. Does anyone have other questions? What you have on other matters are the end of the year financial performance indicators. That's for information only. I would recommend the board take a look at those also, those in more detail. Yes.
One quick question.
Yeah.
On the figures you showed us, we counted in about $70 million from the COVID funds or CARES Act funds. And since that's led to a surplus, my question is, what are the requirements for dealing with a surplus from CARES Act fund? Are we required to give that money back at some time or use it some other way? And I'm just asking that question in general because I know local governments are required to return surplus funds, and that's what I'm asking.
To take applications, process those applications.
Somebody's talking over.
Yes.
Yeah, I can answer that. So we're not required to give any of that money back. We are, as long as we're using it for some of the eligible expenses that the FTA has laid out. And so what the strategy that we put in place, that Cynthia and Kevin have put in place, is that we do plan on creating a surplus, both in fiscal year 20 and fiscal year 21. We've showed this to the board before, and then that will, and then in fiscal year 22, we will have obligated and drawn down all of the CARES Act funds. And then the surplus that we've created will create the money that we'll need to continue to balance the budget through 2024. So they're just really looking at eligible expenses, and we have plenty of those, and we've got a strategy that over just shy of, I believe it's 2 years, drawing down all that funds.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Parker. Any other questions from the board members concerning the KBIs? Any other comments? All right, then, well, hearing none, I will accept a motion to adjourn this meeting, the Business Management Committee. So moved, Mr. Griffin. Thank you very much, Mr. Board members. We appreciate it very much. Everybody be safe until we meet again. All right? Thank you.
Bye, all.
Bye.
Meeting adjourned. Meeting adjourned. Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.